So we've been doing this here at Aging Gracefully for about a year now, and I appreciate everybody that's subscribed. I appreciate anybody that watches, but I got to be honest with you when I say I've been dreading this review. Not because of the quality of the film itself, because God knows it's one of the good ones. I feel like rewatch will tell us something else perhaps, but 1982's Poltergeist caused me so many restless nights. And you mix this remarkable cast with legends of filmmaking, and you throw in this lovable little girl in peril, you just end up with an iconic, massively quotable movie that many people consider one of the best of all time. And upon rewatch, I kind of feel a different kind of way about it. But we're going to get into that right now. Let's go ahead and roll the intro. Now listen, perhaps my horror movie card just needs to be pulled entirely. I really did not remember that Tobe Hooper directed this movie. Now, I knew Steven Spielberg was attached to it because, honestly, back in the 80s, what was Steven Spielberg not attached to that was completely awesome, right? He was everywhere. But with Tobe Hooper, the two legendary minds, they're so different, you would think it would be hard for the two to work together. Now, I did read just recently, after I realized this, that maybe Tobe Hooper didn't finish the film because of some conflicts. It's all unsubstantiated, but it's interesting to think about. Because, Poltergeist is a piece of cinema that centers around this adorable family of five living in this cookie-cutter neighborhood in California suburb. The parents, Stephen Freeling and Diane, played by Craig T. Nelson and Jo Beth Williams, respectively. They were great. They had a fun paternal, just as parents, they fit the bill. And Craig T. Nelson, this is actually one of the few things I saw him in that I didn't think he was a bad guy. And Jo Beth Williams is amazing. She always reminded me of my mother. Love Jo Beth Williams. Dominique Dunn plays older sister Dana. Oliver Robbins plays middle child Robbie. And the star of the show is the tragically late Heather O'Rourke as Carol Ann. They're just a gorgeous family, and there's just so much warmth between them that you're invested in them right away. And as well as I do, I talk about it all the time, you gotta care about what you're watching. You have to care about these people in peril. Otherwise, you might as well be watching NASCAR, for Christ's sakes. It just doesn't move the needle. And we right away dial in on Carol Ann being drawn to the static of a TV set. And for those of you who know nothing more than streaming, back in the day, there was set programming on your channels. And once that programming was over, which is typically like 1, 2, maybe even 3 o'clock in the morning, all you'd get would be a screen full of snow and speakers full of static. That was what you had. And in this movie, the dad is passed out in his recliner in front of the TV, and you hear that static. And Carol Ann hears somebody talking to her through the static. So we see her get closer to the TV. And as she's talking to this TV, she's talking so loudly that she winds up waking the rest of the family up. Now, they're not too alarmed. All they think at this point is the daughter's just sleepwalking, right? So they're not too concerned with a little kid talking to a TV because little kids do wacky shit. But rewatching this, though, every time I see her move towards the TV set, I just start to well up with dread. I feel it just circling into my chest. That's the effect that this movie will have on you, especially if you grew up with the kind of fear that I grew up with as a child when I watched this thing for the very first time. The second time it happens, the second time Carol Ann moves in front of that television, something actually reaches out through the TV set to grab her. That's when all the freaky stuff starts to go down in the house. But before I get too deep into those paranormal beginnings, can I just say that I had a real serious blast revisiting some of these scenes. The bald dude pedaling that bicycle furiously while he's trying to carry a case of beer over to his buddy's house to watch the football game. Steven sitting there watching the game, but then getting into the battle of dueling remotes with his neighbor because they have the same model TV. And when the neighbor wants to watch Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, Steven and his buddies want to watch the football game. They start clicking back and forth just to screw with each other. I thought that was hilarious when I was a kid, and I wanted to try it out on somebody else's TV, but I couldn't do that. Paranormal guy polishing off a bag of classic Cheetos before he plucks a steak from the fridge of a house he's a visitor in and puts the steak down on top of a countertop with nothing underneath it, no plate, no nothing, while he looks for a pan. That just felt very it just stuck with me for some reason. I don't know. I loved Cheetos as a kid. The toys in the kids' room, Robbie had the best kind of Star Wars, not only sheets, but he had that cool Darth Vader set that held all the figures. I mean, it just spoke to me. It was a great nostalgia trip. And that's exactly what you sign up for when you watch a movie from your childhood. You want to be taken back to those moments in your life. And Poltergeist, when I sat down to watch this again, it did that for me in spades. The creepy stuff, though, it starts to happen after Diane watches her oldest teenage daughter. Now, she's not 18. She's 16, 17 maybe, still underage. But she's getting catcalled by the construction workers that are at these folks' house digging them a pool. Then the mom smiles about it. I don't know, man. I know we saw Diane and Steven smoking weed after all the kids went to bed. I thought that was a little much, but again, it's the 80s. They're adults. Who am I to be a prude and tell them they can't imbibe? But she just watches her daughter getting, kissy-faced at by all these men in their 40s. I might have said something. I probably would have said quite a few things. She sees, though, Diane does, when she's sitting there with Carol Ann, she sees all these chairs pulled away from the table, right? Ask Carol Ann about it. She doesn't say anything, or she says maybe it's something about it being the people from the TV set. So Diane pushes all the chairs back in, goes to get a rag to clean everything up, the counter, the table, and when she looks back, I'm talking in a matter of seconds, those chairs are all arranged on top of the table in a way that is impossible for them all to be standing upright. But they're there, and it freaks her out. But then she finds it amusing. We get to a scene where Steven comes home, and his wife is giddy about the whole thing. His wife is giddy about the entire event. Not only that, but they've made a game where they've drawn a circle on the floor of the kitchen, and they set a chair in that circle, and they watch it move across the room by itself. And Steven is blown away by this. And then they sit Carol Ann in the center of this circle with a football helmet on and do the exact same thing to this little girl. Don't know in hindsight if that was the best of ideas, but they did it anyways. At this point, it's all laughs and amazement and fun. They think that there's something goofy, paranormal going on, but they don't think anything harmful of it. And then the shitstorm happens. Then everything falls apart because there is a massive thunderstorm. There's a tree outside of Robbie and Carol Ann's room that has been bothering Robbie forever. He's not a fan of it. He looks at it. It looks creepy. Talks to his dad about it, and his dad gives him one of those speeches where it's just an old tree. It's very wise, blah, blah, blah. Clearly the guy's a dopehead because trees aren't wise. They're just trees. In this moment, once the thing comes out of the TV and then the chairs are moving around, now the tree reaches in through the window and grabs Robbie out of his bed, tries to eat him. This messed me up for a long time. And I'm talking about not just out of my teens, probably in my 20s. That scene where this tree is trying to shove this child inside of it, crazy stuff. The parents hear the commotion, they go outside, they're trying to save their son, but in the chaos of it all, they leave Carol Ann inside by herself. That closet door swings open and things start to get sucked into the closet. Carol Ann is holding on tightly to her headboard. This small, dainty little blonde child is screaming for her parents, holding onto this headboard as this thing is trying to suck her inside the closet. Eventually it wins, and inside the closet she goes. Now they save Robbie, but then they realize Carol Ann's all alone inside. They go in, they see what's happened, they see all the mess in the closet, start digging through it, and they can't find their little girl. And then they're looking around. They actually feel relieved that she's not in there, because that means she has to be somewhere, right? So then they go looking around the rest of the house. The mom freaks out because she thinks she's been sleepwalking and now she's paranoid she's in the pool. So they go out in the pool, that muddy, disgusting hole that would be a pool, and they can't find her in there. And the next scene we get, because Robbie is covered in some sort of gunk, goo, nastiness. I mean, it's just really vile to look at. And the next scene we get is Robbie standing in front of this TV full of static. And he hears his sister calling out to him from inside of the TV set. And it freaks him out. First off, let me give Robbie a lot of credit here. If I'd have just been through what he had just been through, even at this age that I am right now, I'd be catatonic. I would be unresponsive. I would be a mess. And this kid is freaked out. He's handling it a hell of a lot better than I was. But when he hears his sister calling out for help from a TV set, he loses it. Calls out for his mom. Mom rushes in. She's consoling Robbie, and that's when she hears Carol Ann. and she hears her calling out from behind the TV set. Let's just put this out there, and I'll say this a lot because this movie had an impact on me. This fucked with me when I was young. It just scared me to death. I mean, now that I'm grown, it makes me so unbelievably uncomfortable. The idea of, as a parent, your child pleading for you to help them, but being so far out of reach or not able to get to them that you can't help them. I mean, they did this in Stranger Things, if you remember. If you don't watch Stranger Things, you're nuts. You need to go do that. But in Stranger Things, Joyce is looking for Will. And she tears her wall down, and there's like that membrane there that she can actually see Will, and he's begging for her help, and she can't do anything for him. And as somebody watching that, it made me just sick to my stomach, like envisioning myself in that situation. And that's what you get here. You got this back in '82 with Poltergeist. You know, she can hear her mom. Carol Ann can hear her mom, so Diane's communicating with her. But what do you do? You know, this is terror to me, you know, and seeing her sorrow and frustration along with just a river of tears when she's trying to communicate with her baby. Man, it really grips you. And it's a very, very powerful, I mean, that is the obstacle. That is the thing in this movie that is the scariest. This house has taken this child from this mother and father. It's so crazy. Now, Steven is a mess. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. I don't know what the gap is from when they first realize what's happened to Carol Ann to when they reach out to these paranormal experts, but he looks like shit. He talks to them, and these guys, these three, two men and an older lady, they feel like they've seen some things, okay? But they go into this house and they see what's going on in there, and it nearly turns their hair white. I mean, everything that they talked about, and one of them brags about he saw a toy move at a slow pace across the room by itself once, and then they opened this kid's bedroom door where Robbie and Carol Ann had been sleeping, and there's stuff flying all over the place. There's lamps turning on by them. I mean, it's funny, but it's terrifying all at the same time. All three of these people are really good, but Dr. Lesh, played by Beatrice Straight, Jesus, played by Beatrice Straight, I'll never be able to say that. She's awesome. She's fantastic in this movie, and she's a real rock for Diane. And there's a scene where she does a really good job explaining spirits to Robbie so he can kind of understand them a little bit better. I can't really say enough about what she adds to this movie. I thought she was really, really fantastic here as the 6th or 7th lead. She's so good. Really, every scene she's in, I was really impressed with her. Even when they're drinking with each other, I thought that was the best because I'd had to have a few shots dealing with what they were dealing with. And, you know, we get a fourth member of this team who's kind of like the specialist. Zelda Rubinstein, I think is her name, as Tangina. And she's really the driving force for this family to understand, you know, what's inhabiting this house and what they're going to need to do to try to get Carol Ann back. I mean, she fits this movie, and what it would wind up being, she fits the entire trilogy perfectly. I mean, she is that, you know, that Mr. Miyagi, for lack of a better term. She is that perfect combatant for this evil entity in the house because she knows what she's talking about, and she really points all these folks in the right direction on what we have to do to reunite this family. And, you know, without her, these folks wouldn't have stood a chance against the evil that had taken root inside that home. There's no way they would have had the kind of success getting that little girl back that they did without Tangina. So let's talk about what killed this movie, as in what held this movie back from being perfect. And, you know, it's a really short list. You know, for me, we get to a point in the film where the parents lose all track of logic. They're in the clear, seemingly. You know, they're all together, and they're packing up the house, and they're getting the hell out of Dodge, and they're putting everything in the rearview mirror. But then Steven, the father, decides he has to go and take care of something at the office. Dude, fuck the office. I'd never leave my family home alone again. It would never happen. Then we get to the very end, and Diane leaves Robbie and Carol Ann in that bedroom, the bedroom that tried to eat them, to go take a bath. Now, Joe Beth Williams in a bathtub ain't a bad thing. You gotta be kidding me. Granted, you have to have that final scene with the final scare, and it's scary, and it's a great final scene. But come on, man. Just... Okay, now on to the stuff that makes you smile. What did this movie kill? What carried the film? What made it what it is today? And how about the parents? How about Craig T. Nelson and Jo Beth Williams? I mean, you really believed their pain and how they had to traverse this movie while looking for their little girl without really knowing or really understanding how they were going to get her back or where she was. I mean, Jo Beth Williams was just stellar in this film. She was every bit the heroine and the final girl that we need for something like this. Dads are great. I'm proud of being a dad, but moms are the ones that keep things together, and they're the ones that get shit done. And you just knew she wasn't going to lose Carol Ann to that house, no matter what was in it. Don't underestimate mom rage. Story, the story was top notch. I love the fact that we get to a point where Steven's boss comes over to check in on him. And Steven winds up learning through a conversation that they've been building these developments because Steven is part of the firm that builds these neighborhoods. They've been building them on land that used to be cemeteries. And maybe that's why they make such a big profit and they do so well. But they're building them on land that used to be cemeteries. So these things taking over the Freeling house are because the house was built on top of graves, essentially. They never moved the graves. They took the headstones down, but the graves were all underneath the home. So, in fact, we get to that last scene where Diane is in the pool, the muddy, disgusting pool, and skeletons are coming up from the pool. Super gross, super scary, and I read somewhere that those were actually real skeletons that they used. Because some years later, Jo Beth Williams had asked them, where'd you get those things? They were very realistic. Oh, that's because they were real. Very gnarly. I don't know if I'd have been okay with that if I were her. Now, the child actors were awesome in this movie as well, and we can't talk about them without attaching the tragedy that followed them after these movies. I mean, Dominique Dunne didn't have a great deal to do here because she was the older sibling, and as the older sibling, she was able to go to other people's homes, the grandparents' house. She had a really hard time dealing with the fact that Carol Ann was somewhere in the home and nobody could help her. I mean, she portrayed that very well in the scene where she hears Carol Ann talking to them, and she's just holding her head and sobbing. So she didn't deal with it very well. But after the movie came out, she wound up being killed. Dominique Dunne was wound up being killed by, I believe it was her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, in what was just senseless and awful crime. I mean, Griffin Dunne is an actor that a lot of people know. If you don't know his name, you know his face. This was his sister, and this was a very sad situation. And speaking of sad situations, I remember hearing about Heather O'Rourke, the little girl that played Carol Ann, and this was perfect casting. She was so good, sweet, believable. That epic line of hers where she turns around from that static TV and she says, "They're here," horror history. And she wound up making 3 of these films before dying herself to some sort of intestinal issue, which is just insane for me to think about. How does something like that happen with all the medicine and doctors and even then that we had? I mean, for a little kid to die because of something like that, I remember learning that she had died in real life. And it made it harder for me to watch these movies because in my child brain, it just kept suggesting to me that the Poltergeist finally won. I mean, as a kid, that's what it felt like. So it was hard for me to go back to these movies, even after this rewatch. I bet I've seen this movie only 3 or 4 times. Impactful 3 or 4 times, but it hasn't been very much. So it's just a heartbreaking loss losing that little girl. The movie, though, Poltergeist from 1982, is a 9 out of 10 for me. It's a classic scary movie that just holds up so well. Literally dozens of pieces of this that bring back very real, visceral type feelings when you watch it. The goddamn clown at the end of the movie that drags Robbie under the bed. That was just awful stuff. That's not it. That's where I started having a little bit of trepidation being around clowns. I mean, there's a lot of clowns in my family, but my God, that was something else. Just awful stuff. I rewatched this last night, and then I saw Carol Ann and her mom's are in that bathtub, and they're covered with this pink goo, this pink plasma, and she looks up eventually. They're trying to wake her up, and she opens her eyes, looks up, and says, "Hi, Daddy," and I teared up 100%. I mean, you feel something watching this film, and what better way to escape from reality for a couple of hours than going on a roller coaster just fear and love and hope, and at times it's just some utter despair in this movie. And there's absolutely nothing like it. And Poltergeist is one of the great ones. And on the off chance that you haven't seen it, you should probably see it. And if you've seen it before, sit down with it again. It's very emotional. It's very heavy. Like, I don't know when I'll watch it again. It's very much worth watching just because of how scary and how well done it is and how believable everybody is in it. But it's heavy for me. So that being said, if you liked it, let me know what you thought. What scenes of that movie really bring you back to a place in time? Think about subscribing to the channel if you like talking about horror films or you like listening to people talk about horror films. I would appreciate it. You can click the like button for this one. Click the notification bell. It'll tell you when we upload. Until next time, though, I'm Matthew Essex. This is Aging Gracefully. I appreciate you guys tremendously. Have a good day. See you on the other side. Did I say have a good day? It's on my sign off.